What's up, everybody? It's your boy Pro Shock and Nice Jojo with a different video for you guys. Here we are for the MBA, not the NBA, the MBA, the Moonlit Battlers Alliance. And you guys know that I'm doing this draft and everything, but a boy Haunch has been wanting to do power rankings, doing this, that, and that, and he just can't have the time. So you know what I thought to do? Since this has some players that are relatively new, sort of new, and experience all mixed together in both the Nat decks and this in the national decks and the low tier decks, I would say. I'm going to go ahead and give my thought and opinions on each and every team. Now, again, I want to strictly state this. These are just opinions. My opinion could matter to someone, and if so, I don't know what you're doing with yourself. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But overall, this is just an opinion. This is not something to just look into, fix up, change up, or anything. I'm going to give my opinions and just rank these teams. Now, obviously, if power rankings, I would rank these up and then obviously list off the reason why. But I'm going to do something a little bit different for power rankings. I'm going to rank the teams from 1 to 10, and we're going to just go team by team. Both for this one and for the low tier, but the low tier will have its own not private video, its own video for that one as well. And I'm doing this for Haunch to help him out because I know he wants to start doing power rankings. So until he gets proper power rankings and gets proper time to do recordings and stuff like that, hopefully this will help Haunch out and really get something going because I know he wants to make this league really good, really special, and just a really good place for a lot of people. And that's what my man Haunch loves to do. So I'm going to help him out. So first off, let's kick it off with the team that had the first overall pick, and that is the Chimchars United and Miklas. If I butcher your name, I'm sorry. So looking at their team, and they're actually my week 2 opponent, if you guys actually don't know, which I'm not going to spoil into any details of it, but look at his team. He has got Dragapult, Mamoswine, Porygon2, Arcanine, Metagross, Rotomo, Wheezing, Quagsire, Mega Absol, and Noctowl. Very scary offensive core with just 2 Pokemon, with Dragapult and Mamu, that can check up almost every single thing in the game. Really, really good. The speed tiers on this team, I'm not going to lie, are a bit wacky in some terms. You got your main speed in Dragapult and the Mega Absol. Really good speed from a base 142, if I remember correctly, for Dragapult, and then a base 115, if I remember correctly, for Mega Absol. I'm not going to go on a showdown right now to look that up because it has my teams and stuff, and I didn't pull up a private tab and anything like that for this as well. So there's that. So 2 really good elite speed tiers, but then the speed tiers kind of drop down. Then you have, obviously, Mamoswine, which is a base 80 speed tier. But then you got Arcanine at base 95. But more times out of not, Arcanine has been that Pokemon to where it can be speed, but it also can be defensive speed. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can build speed, outspeed the bulk of Pokemon, and then run the rest into, like, its HP and defenses and stuff like that. So, in my mind, the base 95 speed tier is not the worst thing, but it's also, I feel like, not the best helping. One thing on this team that is definitely a bit of an issue is definitely hazard setting. He only has 2 rockers, on one being Mamoswine and one being Metagross. Both sometimes don't want to be carrying rocks. One can kind of carry the other, and the other can be more offensive. Then you obviously have Toxic Spikes by Wheezing. There's no other form of hazards besides those 2 right there. And in my mind, the way you look at the game formatting, Spikes has definitely been a big thing that has played a big massive part. English, it's hard. Massive part of the whole Generation 8, and Spikes have definitely, throughout this time frame, have really proven to be a massive hindrance, because more times rocks are easily countered by heavy-duty boots. And yes, Spikes do exactly the same thing, but when you think about heavy-duty boots, is that one item that fits on every single flying type out there. And yeah, it forces that flying type to bring it. It also sometimes will force that flying type to even have removal of some part if it doesn't feel comfortable with it. And that's where Spikes comes into play and really can cripple down the rest of your team. So with this team, it's definitely Spike week. There's a good couple of mons that can avoid spikes. Things like the Rotom, things like Wheezing, as long as it's levitating. and things like Noctowl. The removal on this team is not the greatest. It's got Defog Rotomo, Defog Wheezing, and Defog Noctowl. Now, more times than not, Noctowl is probably not being brought to a lot of games. There's probably a good match or two you can bring it, maybe defensively, but sometimes you want to bring Noctowl actually more offensively because they actually can hit a lot harder than what people give credit towards. Look at a man who's won a championship with Noctowl on his team. I will rewind the PMC video if I have to show you that. You got Wheezing, which really doesn't want to run defog. There's so much really good support tech you can run with Wheezing, with Will-O-Wisp, Pain Split, Destiny Bond, Haze, and then just dual stab, and maybe add Flamethrower to be pseudo offensive. Like there's a lot of things you can use with Wheezing. And then obviously your last remove being Rotomo. Rotomo can kind of always be able to run defog almost every single week, but then there's kind of some nasty plot sets you can run. Then there's like Pain Split defensive sets you can run. Just a lot of things. So I would definitely say the weak points of this team, I will say, are probably the hazard setting and hazard removal. Otherwise, I think he's got some really good, naturally good defenses. I think he's got good natural, good offensive as well. Overall, I think I'm going to rank. He does also have actually, I guess, a somewhat form of hazard removal with a Magic Bounce user and Mega Absol. But overall, I think this team, if I had to give it a rank, um, I'm gonna give the team a solid. I'm gonna go a solid 7.5. There's definitely a lot of pieces of this team I do like. There's a lot of things I think is really, really good about this team, and they definitely showed in its week one game, which I won't spoil, obviously. And I might do match of the week. I don't know about those yet. I might just do the rankings and stuff like that. And if you guys are maybe interested in, as long as until Hunch gets a love, if you guys want to see the rankings of who I think were the best battles of the week type of thing and like that, let me know in the chat. Or maybe rank the teams after every single week and go from there. Let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Milika's getting a 7.5. I don't think this is a really bad team. I definitely think there's a lot of goodness with this. There's teleport with both Arcanine and P2, which I think is really great. But again, some of the big flaws about a team is definitely the hazards and definitely the removal in terms of that. But otherwise, I think this team is really, really good. And I honestly wouldn't mind messing around with this team as well. Up next, we have KR Breb and the Toronto Machamps. And he has a Lando Eye, which is allowed Sheer Force, Zero Aura, Slowking, Registeel, Cinderace, Togekiss, Skuntank, Drampa, Cradilly, Meanfu, and Swirlix. This team is very defensively and offensive, which is very I think it's balanced decently well. Things about this team. There is really no hazards. There's only two rockers in the form of Lando. Oh, actually, no, three rockers. Well, I guess I should let me take that comment then. He's got three rockers in the form of Lando Eye, Registeel, and Cradilly. He has removal in Skuntank, Togekiss, in Lando Eye. He does seem to kind of have a bit of a random team. He does have webs, which is an option, which, I mean, Swirlix can come to a game or two, potentially, if the matchup's just right. Excuse me there. Sorry about that. I was waiting to talk because I knew a sneeze was coming up there. Overall, his offense: Lando Eye, Zero Aura, Cinderace. Oh dear God, that is very disgusting. That is very hard hitting offense that can really run through a team in terms of what it can really do. I think there's a cool little aspect of Trick Room with this team. I think is really nice. Like there's things like Daily, Drampo, Slowking even itself. Even things like maybe some room service Pokemon like Togekiss or Registeel that can take advantage of Trick Room, which is really nice. I think overall the bulk of this team is relatively good. I will say again, the removal is another flaw about this team. I don't think Skunk Tank really wants to bring Defog every single week. Togekiss doesn't want to be pressured to defog. As a person that's used Togekiss, I've actually loved using Togekiss more of a pseudo offensive route than an actual defensive Pokemon. Yeah, well, at least running Roost at least. But I've never really saw Togekiss as being a Pokemon to run defog. I mean, then you're gonna be forcing Skunk to run defog, or then you're gonna be forcing Land to run defog. So I will say one thing I think is kind of weak about this team is definitely going to be the hazard removal. I also think the hazard setting is also relatively weak. You do have some reliable mons that can do that every single week. Don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty sure you don't want either Registeel or Cradilly being forced as your rocker every single week. because you're going to come back and forth, and I don't think it benefits the team all that well. If I had to rank this team, though, I think I would give this an. I guess I would go another 7.5. I'm not really a big fan of Yanfu and Swirlix. I think Swirlix has a point for being 2 points with its webs and all that, but I think again it wasn't really necessary. I think you could have gone better with just going with a decently good 3 pointer. There are obviously things like Credile, which is a low tier, good water resistance for things like Dracovish out there, which is decently well. And again, has a couple of my fan favorites on there. Lando I've actually used before, both Sheer and Lance Sand. I loved it. Zero Aura, big fan. Cinderace, we have a love hate relationship going on right now with Pyro Ball, and then Hogagus, which is one of my fan favorite mons out there as well. I think overall this team is not bad. It's not like really bad at all. It's actually relatively good. I definitely think it's got again some of the few flaws that like the Chimchars had as well. So overall, I think this team's not bad. I think it can definitely put on some good work. And I don't know and also just to point out here, I don't know any of these coaches really at all. So I don't. This is again based on just team assumption versus just anything else. So, but overall, I do love this team. It's really really good. It's a team I actually wouldn't mind messing around with as well. Up next is Palkia, who was my week one opponent. You guys saw Palkia's team consists of Torrentee, Infernape, Jirachi, Tapu Bulu, Mega Garchomp, Drapion, Dracovish, Luxray, and Glalie. So looking at his team, he only has one hazard remover, and that is Torrentee. Torrentee definitely does not want to bring Defog every single week. So that is the one of the big flaws I see with this team. Another kind of pseudo flaw you can kind of nitpick for this. He only has 3 Stealth Rockers, and he only has 1 Spikes Abuser. And Glalie is that type of Pokemon that you don't really want to bring every single week for Spikes. Because Spikes sometimes isn't the greatest, sometimes it's not the best. In terms of rockers, you have Infernape, Jirachi, Mega Garchomp. Mega Garchomp never really wants to bring Stealth Rocks to a game. SD, Scale Shot, and then Earthquake with coverage is usually what you want to go with. Then you have obviously Jirachi, which doesn't really want to run rocks all the time. It can if you really want to. And Infernape, again, do not really want to run rocks on it all unless you're going to bring a somewhat defensive Infernape or something like that. So again, there's just some things about the hazard setting on this team that's not really great. In terms of the team itself, it's definitely kind of all around the place. I mean, you also talk to Spice with Drapion, but again, Drapion is that type of Pokemon that you kind of sometimes don't want to force to bring Toxic Spikes, just because sometimes Drapion is so good that you can bring it offensively. It's a good offensive Pokemon. It doesn't really need to be all that defensive every single time of the week. It's just so good at what it does, and I just really personally love it. It was definitely something on my radar I was looking at for this season, but obviously got sniped. In terms of the cores, which I haven't really discussed as well in terms of what I see here, where I look at this Fairy Dragon Steel core, it's interesting. You know, Jirachi, and in my opinion, pairs with Mega Garchomp, not Dracovish, because Dracovish, in my opinion, has been turned towards more of a water type than as a dragon type. Um, the the core is very interesting. It's not really an amazing core. You got 2 bonds weak to ice. You got 2 bonds weak to fire. It kind of condensates with each other, not in the good way that you were hoping. And also, you look at your fire, water, grass core. You know, your grass is a Bulu, which Bulu, I think, is always trying its hardest to be a good Pokemon. And I think it can be deep down. It just needs to find some way to do that. You have a water type, which is Dracovish, which I'm a massive fan of. 4 championships with that bad boy, or 5. I can't remember where the 5th one's at though. But anyways, and Luxray, an extremely slept on Pokemon in Draft League, which I think is so good. And then you obviously have things like Jirachi, Torrentee. So overall, this team it has some decently good speed tiers. It has some decently good offense. It doesn't have a ton of bulk, which is definitely a big flaw in the draft where it cannot rely on its bulk. Like Torrent can be defensive, but you don't really want to bring defensive Torrent all the time. Where offensive Torrent can really smack a team up. So if I had to be honest with this team, again, like I said, there's only one hazard remover. The hazard setting is kind of limited, in my opinion. I'm honestly going to give this team probably a solid 6. Again, it's not like a bad team. I just think there could have been things that, could have been priors. Like, if there was at least another hazard remover or so that was very reliable, I would probably bump this team up to probably a solid 7 if that would be the case. Just because, again, the team, it's just Hazard week. Spikes destroys this draft. It really, really does. Spikes, and I mean, Rocks don't really do much to this team besides Torn and Glalie, but again, Spikes just hurt this team so badly. Like, if you get Spikes up and they don't bring Drapion, you get Toxic Spikes up as well, it's just gonna really whittle down a team, and I just don't really think it's gonna. And plus, I don't know if I really like the ground pick in Garchomp if you're pairing it with Blue, because Garchomp really wants to run Earthquake every single week, and if it can't run Earthquake, it can't really take advantage of its proper stab of ground, which I think is kind of a really hurting to. And plus, I mean, you got Pokemon that can definitely benefit from it, but there's only like 3 on here that kind of really do. Luxray kind of does, but it still kind of still dies to Earth to ground moves. But again, I'm gonna have to give this team a solid 6. Again, I don't think it's really that bad of a team. I think there's just some things that are not really good with the team. Kicking it off next, we have the Median Metachamps, coached by Healbot, who I believe is also relatively new and I think is in possibly their first league ever. They have Urshifu Single Strike, which I cannot believe they got in the 4th pick, which was kind of low key hoping it made it to me. Clefable, Slowbro, Rotom Heat, Mega Aerodactyl, Roserade, Duraludon, Runerigus, and Liper. Again, another team that kind of limited its points in terms of what it can do. Now, there is one really strong flaw I see in this team. Again, no proper hazard removal. Yes, you have Rotom Heat, which can run Defog, but again, we've all used Rotom Heat in this time. When you can play it defensively, you run Volt Switch, you run Will-O-Wisp, you run Thunderbolt, you run Overheat, or you run your Dual Stab, Willow, and then Pain Split. You do something with it. Rotom Heat is such a Pokemon you do not ever want to really bring defensively unless you're running heavy duty boots and playing defensive with that. And Mega Arrow, again, does not want to run Defog. If you're running Defog on Mega Arrow to get hazard removal, you're doing something wrong. In terms of the hazards, though, I like the team with hazards here. Mega Aerodactyl is a Pokemon that can sometimes fit rocks on. It's obviously never going to really want to do that, but it's not a bad Pokemon to fit rocks on. Clefable can pseudo reliably run rocks. Duraludon can pseudo reliable run. It has a designated rocks Pokemon in Runerigus. If the matchup is right for it to be defensive, there's a prankster user in Library, which can definitely play a little bit of annoyance. Really good spike stacker in Roserade and Toxic Spikes user as well. Decently good pivoting with having some Volt Switch users, some U-turn abusers, and teleport users as well. Urshifu Single Strike is very scary and very dangerous. And the team is semi built decently well around it. There's some decent fairy resist on the team, which is really, really good. There's not like a ton, which is kind of a thing. Flying resist is really limited. Well, I guess flying resist is actually handled relatively well. But overall, I think this team's not that bad. It has a lot of fan favorites. Of course, me means Clefable, my girl Pixie, Mega Aerodactyl, which getting access to Dragon Dance this generation, disgusting. I don't know what Game Freak you are doing, but you made this Pokemon much more of a powerhouse, which is both good and bad at the same time. Overall, this team's not the greatest again, but I think there's a lot of good things to it. I think there's a lot of good pieces. There's a lot of good, this and that. I think overall, fantastic team. I think he got things in probably the right, relatively rare round. I think round 4 Rotom Heat was actually a pretty good steal to get in that terms. I also think a good round 5 Mega Arrow was also really good as well. I think overall he drafted his team relatively well in the rounds. He knew he probably wasn't going to get stuff back and went for the right value to go grab from them. So overall, fantastic team. I'm going to probably have to give this team probably a 7.5. Again, there's some things that are crippling about it, but I think what makes up for it again is good pieces that can kind of rely on pivoting and are kind of abusing and using ways to get Urshi in to just click attacks in terms of that way. So again, I'm going to give this team a 7.5, but it's just barely a 7.5. I'll say that for some reasons on that. Again, decent pivoting, everything else is good, and that's a really good job for Healbot. Up next, we have the Slippery Superiors in Jordan. They have Gliscor, Mega Charizard, Superior, Azumarill, Scizor, Regieleki, Gothitelle, Marini, Ditto, Shelmet, and Morgrem. They went extremely budget heavy with 7 picks, essentially, and went with baby Pokemon to finish out their team, except for Ditto. Now, even though they drafted some baby Pokemon, they're baby Pokemon that actually put in work and can really support a team. let me talk about this. Morgrem gives you a prankster Pokemon, gives you really good screen access, and plus, Morgrem by itself is not that bad of a Pokemon to use as well. It's decently well. My good friend Brendan, aka Daredevil26, actually used it himself, and I think he brought it to playoffs and everything like that. And it ultimately almost paid off for him. Shelmet is a GOAT pick. I don't care what anyone says. You're working for something, gets you spikes, toxic spikes, runs Eviolite, and can seriously run a good defensive core with it. I think it's worth it. It's a good ground switching for this team, which again doesn't really have to pressure that on Gliscor and doesn't really have to pressure that on Serperior, which is good about that as well. Ditto is that bond that literally can just sit on a team and does nothing and puts in work for your team. Ditto can literally just be on your team, opponent's team, and you can never prep for Ditto. Ditto never comes. And even if it does come, you have set up, you can still lose to Ditto. So that's really good. I think getting Gothitelle really late in the draft, which was really good too. Really good trapping ability, and it definitely is going to force massive prep on your opponent. Again, the biggest prep of anything is Shadow Tag. You have to make sure your Pokemon are swapped out at the right time. You need to hit the right Pokemon that get out of that as well. Overall, Gothitelle, really good Pokemon for trapping. Really trap certain Pokemon that can definitely be a really big nuisance for a lot of drafts in terms of like that. So I think really good. Regieleki. I don't know how I feel about this Pokemon. He gets walled by every single ground type known to mankind. But I will say he, I'm probably saying this wrong. I do apologize, Jordan, in advance. But Superior and Azumarill are very good grasslands. Really good ground answers by themselves. Also paired with a Gliscor, which is also relatively defensive as well, which I think was good. I don't know how I feel about Gliscor going first overall. I definitely think it made sense with no hidden power being in this game. We did allow cut moves like return and stuff like that to be allowed, except for hidden power. That's the only thing that they not get allowed. So I do understand why going first pick with Gliscor. But pairing that off also Mega Charizard X. That's just, if you guys don't know Old Man Tough from the WWE back, I think like season 4 or season 5, he actually did this core 2 with these two, and it's very disgustingly good. Superior, good contrary Pokemon. Yes, can even though it can't use hidden power, I think it's still a slept on Pokemon that I think people in Nadex leagues do need to watch out for because they don't have the proper resistance, and plus if this starts boosting, you're just letting this thing do it. They have Scizor, which I guess I should have went for him earlier if I had the opportunity to, but it's too late now. But they have Scizor, which is a fantastically good Pokemon. Good, reliable defogger if need be, along with Gliscor. Now, these are two defoggers that can easily come every single week. Superior does get access to defog as well, and defog can be somewhat slapped on there if you're going to be only running like a one support set, which honestly, Superior can run support and actually do decently well with as well, which is really good. Um, the speed tiers are lackluster on this team. The technical highest space speed tier, I believe, is 113 with Superior, and then 110 with a regular 100 with Charizard. We don't really count Regieleki because Regieleki already outspeeds him pretty much about everything else in the format. Just about. So speed tiers, I definitely think are going to be a big issue. We're getting Gothitelle. You can run something like potential Trick Room and stuff like that, but Trick Room doesn't really benefit this team. All Gothitelle really does is trap and kind of play annoyance. Gothitelle, I've actually seen someone 6-0, I think, off lead with a Trick Rocks from a Garchomp on with Gothitelle, and Gothitelle just sub calm mine until it was +6. Tricked back and then just clicked attack and then just won the game from there. And the guy was so salty that he actually left the league because of that. So, yeah. But overall, this team really decently good. Hazard game is very much kind of there. I only see one Stealth Rocker, which is a little bit of an issue. We see Toxic Spikes. We do see Spikes and Toxic Spikes. So I will say Hazard setting again is relatively limited, and removal it's decently there. It's not the worst removal. It's definitely some decently good removal that we've seen so far. So I'm gonna give this team. I'm gonna honestly give this team probably a solid 7.5. Again, it's close to being an 8. I just wish there was maybe something that could have actually provided a little bit more hazard removal, or maybe a good more hazard setting, which besides one rocker, which I think a lot of times people always draft two rockers. It's because two rockers help you give you one mon that can run rocks effectively, and then one that can play more of an offensive breaker potentially, and then like kind of switch it back and forth if need be, which is really good. Obviously, we have my team. Sorry for that. My voice does that every time I drink some soda sometimes. We have my team, and I'm not gonna really break down my team. I'm not gonna say my team's a 10 out of 10 because honestly, my team is really, really good. But there's some things I need to know about my team. What's really kind of lackluster about my team is definitely the hazard removal. The hazard removal on my team is very, very weak. I only have rapid spin. That is it. I do not have defog, which actually can play a big factor in terms of other things. Pressure and defog on my opponent's side is actually relatively good, which is really good about my team. As I do have a rock setter, I have a spike setter, I have toxic spikes, but that is it. My hazards are extremely limited and very bad in this. My removal is subpar and decent at best. I do have some very scary pieces on this team, being Karen Black, Melmetal, Spectre, Zapdos, just a lot of good things. Some really decently good low tier valued stuff like Shell Smash Wartortle or Defensive Wartortle, Intimidate Cycling with Torracat. You know, my speed is a it's not the worst. It could be better, particularly. I have some really good pieces in terms of physical breakers and special breakers. I have a good defensive piecing with Melmeta Vinu, along with things like Claydol and War Turtle with defenses as well. Karen Black just being an absolute monster. So I think I'm honestly going to give my team honestly, a 7. My team is not perfect by any means necessary. Again, I could have had maybe one or two more stealth rockers or something like that. I could have gotten at least one defogger for this team. Um, I think overall this team is relatively good. It proved really well in week one. We'll just have to see what goes forward on the next week. There, now we get into hopefully not this. We get into the GWS Gyarados and Jaken, who have Mega Alakazam, Lando T, which I was actually kind of low key hoping I got. Heatran, Weavile, Primarina, Chestnut, Crobat, Electros, Mudbray, and Cutiefly. Now, what's really hurting this team is very dangerous. This thing is very scary. A lot of good, phenomenal physical breakers and special breakers on the same time. Decent bulk on the side of this team. Mega Alakazam is always going to be a threat, and that is not a nasty plot. Mega Alakazam, thank God. Lando T obviously being the king of OU in a land where hidden power does not exist, and it makes it much more of a threat. Heatran, just a easy, okay Pokemon. Weavile, you gotta love him. Primarina, you gotta love her. Chestnut, interesting pickup here. Crobat, really good Fastamon, really helps kind of tie in that base speed tier between the 150 to the 130, down to the 125, then down to the 91, stuff like that. I do think this team has got decent speed. It has that decent bulk. One thing about this team, it's definitely weak in hazards. You can bring Mudbray, but Mudbray basically dies. It can set up rocks, but then dies. Same thing with Keyfly. It sets up webs, then it dies. Your only rockers then in this matchup would have to be Lando T and Heatran. Now, Heatran is a Pokemon that can actually relatively rely on rocks if it's a defensive trans set. And Lando can also do it as well. So I think the other main two users of Stealth Rocks actually are both successful at that. Same thing with Lando running Defog, as along with Crobat is the only way to remove hazards, which is a bit of a problem with this draft. Having at least one or two spinners is very viable in my opinion, because again, you take advantage of speed control with that, and you get removal of hazards, which I think plays another big part of that as well. Overall, he has very great physical breaking with Lando T, Weavile, and in terms Crobat. He has really good special breaking with Heatran, Alakazam, Primarina, and even Crobat to a degree, and obviously Electros. I definitely think there are some pieces that are built together well. I do think there's some things that kind of are a little bit issue with the team. Like I see very few switches to grass on this team, which definitely could play an issue. Overall, I think this team it's kind of not that built well. I guess with Zam, like yeah, you got Weavile, but Ghost kind of just goes. Brrr. Yes, you do have bulletproof with Chestnut, but again, you don't want to pressure both Weavile and Chestnut to be your Ghost resist. So I think having a normal type on this team would have probably helped this team a lot. The ground is not even an issue with this team. So that's really really good about this because again, Heatran without pressure by ground typing is really good. There's definitely a couple of things on this team that are nice about it. Not a lot of it's kind of all that great. There's definitely some fun pieces and some good pieces to it. But I just overall think this team's kind of lacking some things. Again, it's lacking really decent hazard removal. I mean, Crobat doesn't really want to run Defog every single week. I think Crobat has got a lot more utility than that. Same thing with Lando. I don't think Lando wants to be defog every single week as well, especially when there's a lot of things Lando can do. So overall, I'm going to give this team a 6.5. Again, I'm not ranked. I'm kind of hammering on the fact of certain things that are important in draft, which is the hazard removal and hazard setting. If I was ranking these teams based on the Pokemon, we'd be having some 8s, some 9s, even some 10s probably then. But overall, this team, it's just kind of weak on the hazard setting a little bit. It's weak on the removal. It definitely has some things going for it. I don't think there's anything that's wrong with a team like this. But I think overall, this team just needs some things to kind of help push it up more in terms of what it can actually do. And I think there's a lot of potential still with this team. I'm actually up the Philadelphia Empoleons and Coach Alfredo 2846. They have Celesteela, Tapu Koko, Crocodile, Blastoise, Serena, Mega Pinsir, Alolan Raichu, Adino, Blaziken, and Regirock. Now, this is a very solid team. You have really two good Rapid Spin users, which is really good. You actually have viable defog option with Blaziken, which is also really good, and same thing with Coco, which actually can provide actually decent viability too. You have decently good hazard setting with Crocodile and Regirock, which are very reliable rock setters, which is really good. This team has decent wish passing, which is really good with Aldino. It has very good Pokemon in terms of Celesteela plus Coco, which pretty much like almost sinners like from an offensive pairing pair beautifully together. You have Roland Raichu, which pairs with Tapu Koko, obviously. They definitely took some priorities in making sure ground is not that much of a problem, even though ground is a bit of a strong weakness on this team still. But overall, there's like Shell Smash Blastoise, which is really good. I think there's a lot of great pieces to this team. Crocodile being a really good Pokemon as well with Intimidate. I think this is a very strong team. Mega Pinsir, a Pokemon I've only used once, but did take me to playoffs the first time I ever used it. Never tried it again. Definitely should think about doing that. But again, I think this team really comes together well. I think there's a lot of pieces that compare so well with this. So I think honestly, this is going to be our first team that I'm going to give an 8.5 to. I think the only thing I have to critique about the team is probably the speed tiers. The speed tiers are a bit out there. Like you have a Lone Raichu, which can have good speed tier outside of terrain, but you kind of draft Raichu and then you grab terrain with it. Basically, just give it the double speed boost, which I think is a little hindrance because then you can't use Raichu outside of it, and you're only going to use Raichu when you have Coco at times, which I think is a little hindering a little bit in terms of your building. Celesteela is a Pokemon I love because it's so unpredictable, even though I kind of run it kind of one way. But the unpredictability of a Pokemon is really, really good. Blastoise Shell Smash, like I said, is really good. Serena is actually a really good offensive piece as well. And just overall, really good. I think, again, kind of the limited hazards of just Stealth Rocks is kind of not the best. There could have been at least another Spike, Sticky Whip, or Toxic Spikes, one of the other two, and this team could have probably been a 9 for me, to be honest with you. But the fact that it's only just two rockers, which both are very reliable rockers in their own right as well. Just overall, I think the team is solid, really good. I think the removal's good, the hazards are good, the team is good itself. So overall, like I said, 8.5. I think this is a really good team. Up next, we have Drunyan05 and the Palm City Porygons. They have Mega Lopunny, Tangrowth, Starmie, Reuniclus, Dragalge, Klefki, Charizard, Golurk, Raikou, and Scraggy. Now, this team, it's got some problems. Removal is weird on this team. You have default Charizard, default Klefki, and Spin on Starmie. I can viably say from using Starmie with Spin, it is extremely viable, and I can see Starmie definitely running reliable Rapid Spin in certain matches. I don't know how I feel about Charizard, but Klefki can definitely be a Pokemon that can actually slap defog on him well. So I will give some credit to the removal. It's decently well. However, what are we doing with hazards? We only have one Toxic Spikes user and one Stealth Rock. Well, we do have Klefki with Spikes, which is decently well. I think another Stealth Rocker potentially or Spikes abuser would have been really good, so that way Klefki can not always be forced to run defog, spikes, or whatever every single week and be kind of predictable. There's some fan favorites on this team, though. Fan favorite being Starmie from what I've used in the PBAL. Dragalge, which was on our WBC Championship team. Raikou, which we're currently using right now. Dragalge, like I said. Reuniclus, an absolute favorite of mine. I love a lot of pieces of this team. This team is very fun, very unique, very different. It's so incredibly good. I love every aspect of this team. Very, very good. I think overall, I'm going to give this team probably another, again, a 7. Your dark type is Scraggy, and you can't be bringing that every single week to stop Ghost or Dark type or primarily just ghost typing. You really cannot. I think you could have went for a really good budget normal type potentially to kind of counter that. Besides Megalopunny doesn't really want to be pressured to have to switch into ghost every single time because then the counterplay can weaken it down. And certain ghost types can actually beat Lopunny based on their type, secondary typing. Like there's things like Driftblim that can actually beat it with that set. So there's that. But defensively, it's decently good. I think it's doing decent defensive pieces. There's not a lot of great. There's some phenomenal special wall breakers, some decently good physical wall breakers. But again, I'm gonna probably I'll bump this team up to a 7.5. I think just the offense of this team is really good. The reliable defense of the team is also really good. Again, another big critique is going to probably be the dark typing on this team and just the fact of pseudo hazard pressuring in this match with sets and stuff like that. But overall, I like this team. It's not that bad. It's got some pieces of a team I love to use myself, and just overall, decently good. Up next, we have the St. Louis Swablues and Grrr. He has Tapu Fini, Latios, Mandibuzz, Darmanitan, Mega Beedrill, Ferrothorn, Thunderous Tea, Lickitung, and Palossand. Very. I actually think this is relatively a really good balanced team. It has really, really good special mons, physical mons, decent defensive bulk, and just overall really good pieces to a team. Darmanitan, fan favorite of mine right there. Ferrothorn, reliable rock setter and reliable spikes user every single week, which is really good. He's got Lickitung, which I don't think learns Stealth Rock, but I will take a little bit of a critique right there that there is not. Oh, and there's Palossand. Actually, I'll take that back. Actually, Palossand, which just gets rocks. There's Mega Beedrill, which has fast pivoting, which takes advantage of its adaptability and speed. The speed on this team, it's kind of bad. It only has really Latios, Mega Bee, and then Darm. Finny doesn't really run speed unless you're going to be fully offensive Finny, which sometimes Finny doesn't need to be all fully offensive. I think he's a defensive Finny really supports the team better. You do have Thundy, though, with 101, which is relatively good. I think relatively decently good offensive speed. It has, I think, again, like I said, really good balance of special wall breakers. It has relatively really good defensive bulk, which can actually kind of pair well with each other. So I think I'm overall going to give this team probably a solid, I'm going to say 8. I don't think the option of both Finny, Beedrill, and Thundy having defog on their movesets really does that. I mean, Finny can kind of reliably run that, but if you're not going to really care about your terrain and the Misty Surge, then you kind of really that. And then again, Latios doesn't really want to run that. Beedrill doesn't really run that, and Thunderous doesn't really run. So you're only really relying on Mandibuzz to do that. There's no spinner on his team, which I definitely have to pick up the sheet. And I do think the Lickitung pick is actually a slept on pick that I think can actually take a lot of hits. Really good wish abuser. Not gonna get the most back from a wish, but it's not that bad of a abuser to give to our team and stuff like that. So overall, I do like this team. It's definitely a team I would personally want to use. Super, super good stuff. I really, really like it. Up next, we have the Miami Mimikyus and Adrian on top with Ash Greninja, Mew, Mega Scizor, Sylveon, Delmise, Carkle, Toxapeus, Zygar 10%, and Munchlax. Very decently good team here. Some things I want to note is that the removal is very weird on this team. Removal is primarily Mega Scizor and Delmise or Mew if defensive Mew is going to be your main play. Delwise can pseudo reliably run that every single week, but Delwise I think has a lot more utility in terms of running 3 attacks, including one being its third stab with Steelworker. Mega Scizor can always be pretty much a good, reliable defogger, and I think can honestly play the role of defogger every single week if need be. But again, I don't think you really want Mew to do that because there's so much that Mew can do. Ashgren, I'm not gonna lie to you, I think it's overrated. I don't think it's really that good of a Pokemon, and they went with it. I mean, hey, that's their choice. I'm not going to deny it. I mean, Grin does give them spikes and toxic spikes. It's not that bad of a mon right there. Um, Same with the toxic spikes from Toxapex, which is EU. I definitely think there's a good chunk of too much bulk on this team. There's only like a few pieces of this team that has the screams offense. There's Ashgran, there's Scizor, there's Sylveon, there's Dalmise, and Zygar 10%. About half your team does scream offense, but it's offense that sometimes is optional. Like Mew is optional in offense. Scizor can be optional in offense by just running just a bulk Scizor and then just having no attack in its investment, having to rely on its base attack stat, which can kind of relatively do that as well. Sylveon again can be played more towards a defensive than it can be running things like Specs or something like that. Carkol is a Pokemon. I don't know why. Again, there's also just two Stealth Rockers on this team, and this just the hazard setting is not the greatest. The hazard removal is decent. I'm gonna say this team's probably a 7.5 for me. I think it's got some decent pieces. It's got a slept on Pokemon and Munchlax, pun intended. Munchlax can actually put in a good chunk of work. It's actually a really good Dragon Ball counter as well. So just overall, not a bad team. I think there's obviously things that can be improved on potentially and stuff like that. But now we get to the final team in the Berlin Boltons and Coach Sorrow. He has Mega Galade, Corviknight, Milotic, Amoonguss, Jolteon, Incineroar, Druddigon, Palossand, Clefairy, Zatu, and Misdreavus. This is a really good team. Solid defensive piecing in Amoonguss and Milotic. Really good support pieces with things like Druddigon, Piloswine, Clefairy, Zatu, and phenomenal breakers in Mega Galade, Jolteon. Um, that's actually about it. Well, I guess you can count Corviknight potentially. Well, the removal on this team is it's kind of weak. It's just defog Corviknight and either defog and or Magic Bounce Zatu. That's basically it. Overall, though, this team is very terrifying. You have the best core in offensive Steel Flying paired with Mega Galade, which always makes a team so much harder to prep around Mega Galade and help defeat that thing, which is really good. I think the defensive water and grass being Milotic and Amoonguss is really good. I think the Incineroar is a really good pickup. Druddigon is also relatively good. There is three Stealth Rockers on the team, which all three can reliably run rocks every single week, which is relatively good. Otherwise, there's no other hazards on this team, which is, I think, a bit of a hindrance there, where I think this team can definitely take advantage of things like spikes and toxic spikes potentially. Overall, I think this team's not terrible. I think there's a lot of good piece working with it. Jolteon's the best Pokemon. Everything's going really well with this team. I think we'll give this team a solid 8. I don't think there's really a ton I want to critique with. I think the only thing I want to take away from this team is just hazard removal is very, very limited and very few on this team. Hazard settings, again, very just limited. I mean, its limitation, though, is relatively strong and decently good. But just overall, I think the team not bad, not bad at all. I think it's actually really good. And I want to state that all these teams I think are really solid. Again, the things I pointed out, and you notice that we only had a few that were 8 to 8.5. There were no 9s or no 10s or nothing like that, you know. And I think these were balanced rankings. If you guys think they weren't balanced, you don't think they were fair or anything like that, just again, no, it's just an opinion. Don't take this seriously. And just overall, learn, just have fun with it. This is just for fun. I'm helping Haunch out. So hopefully you guys can appreciate this. But yeah, that is it for me, guys. Leave a like if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to show support for the MBA because this is the season 1 of it, and we're having a good time with it so far. But yeah, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys for next week. Until next time, guys. Peace.